Ultimate Vocal Remover, or UVR for short, is a highly respected tool that allows media producers to separate individual stems out of a finished track. What is so special about Ultimate Vocal Remover is that in addition to being one of the best separation tools on the market, it is also completely free. In the latest episode of our podcast Spatial Audio Monthly, Sam Hocking and I had a conversation with Anthony, the lead developer of UVR. Anthony is also known by his handle Anjok. We talked about the history and the inner workings of UVR, and I'm going to leave a link to that podcast episode in the video description below. Now, this ended up being one of the most interesting discussions we had on our podcast channel so far, and I therefore decided to create a short version of that discussion and post it on my main channel. Quick disclaimer, this conversation was moderated almost exclusively by Sam Hocking. Therefore, a big shout out to Sam for allowing me to post this on my channel. Sam, you absolutely rock. And with that being said, let's turn it over to Sam, Anthony, and Ultimate Vocal Remover.
Many thanks for joining us, Anthony. It's taken a little while to get you here, but you're a busy man.
Yeah.
So it's all perfectly fine. I'm quite a big user of one of the products that you work on, UVR5 Ultimate Vocal Remover, which is kind of, even though my main interest is spatial audio, I use the tools to create stems to separate out spatially. So that's where I've heard about you. But tell us a little bit about you and how you, I know the UVR5 project is kind of like the GUI of a pre-existing vocal remover, more command line type product.
Yeah, that's true.
Explain why you got into it, what your interest is in audio source separation, and why you continue to work on UVR5 and stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, I've always been into audio. I've always been into music. It's always really been a passion of mine, I guess, to kind of get started from the very beginning. I work in IT. That's my day job. I do IT security, so I'm already familiar with all things IT related. And I've always been a huge music buff, music fan. I've made music. I understand certain aspects of music. And I've always wanted to be able to hear instrumental versions of songs and stuff. So I remember one day I was back, I want to say in late 2019, I was on GitHub, and I was just kind of looking around for stem separators, because I found out that started to become a thing after I discovered I can't remember the name of the service, but there was an AI service. I think it was called Phonic Mind. I think that's what it was.
Okay. Yep.
I discovered a service that was like that, and I was like, oh, this is cool. This exists. Right, this is possible, and I started looking around GitHub to see if there's any open source versions of it, and then I found there was one called Vocal Remover. It was made by a developer in Japan. Yeah, and that's kind of what kicked things off. And I installed it. I started using it, and I saw that it was actually quite good. The model was basic, but it was better than anything I'd ever tried prior to that. Yeah. So I used it, and I was just really impressed with the results, and I started going down the rabbit hole. And I started kind of borderline obsessing over it. Like, how is this happening? How does this work? Yeah.
What was that at the time? What model was that? Was it only a vocal and instrument separator?
That was it. Yeah, it just did two stems. It was a two-stem separator.
Two-stem model,
dual stem model. I was more interested in dual stems because I just wanted to do vocal and instrumental. And when I played around with Vocal Remover, I saw how good it was, and I wanted to figure out how to train my own models. So I started off using my laptop, which is pretty weak at the time. I mean, I couldn't really train much. I think I trained with incredibly low settings, and I started with a really small data set of like maybe 100 or 200 samples, and the model came out better than the default that VR came out with. So I was even more impressed by the results, and I was just like, oh wow, this can get better. So I started to
get a faster GPU,
build a better computer. And at the time, I think I got one. I went from one. The first model I trained was on 6 gigabytes of VRAM, 1060. 1060 NVIDIA, I believe it. That's the one that was on the laptop with 6 gigs of VRAM, which is barely enough to get a good model. So I upgraded to a I can't remember the name of that model, the name of that GPU. It was a 12 or 11 gigabyte GPU. I'll just say that. It was NVIDIA, obviously. I had to be. And that I was able to kind of expand training a bit more. And I started getting better models. And so when I started getting better models, it's like, well, I really want to wrap a GUI around this.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
I want to, and I was really, the project was really just for me. I didn't intend for it to become this big thing. So, at the time I was still, even though I was really into all things IT, programming was still a weak point for me at the time. I mean, I understood it to a degree. I was able to read, kind of read it a little bit, but I wasn't like nowhere near where I am now. So I remember I went to Fiverr, that site where you can find people. That's where I found Boskin Dylan.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, he's one of the
earlier.
I still credit him. Yeah, and that's where I met him. And I asked him. I said, "Hey, I want to turn this into a GUI. Can you help me?" And Dylan was great. And like he and I worked really, really well together. Right. And we kind of took the conversation off of Fiverr. We started kind of discussing things more about like, how can we make this a little bit better? And he's a very, very, very talented coder. Very, very good. He kind of built the foundation, the early foundation for what it is now. Like it's like, if you kind of compare it to building a house, like he kind of poured the foundation, right? Like
sure.
And kind of helped me put the blueprints together.
Before we continue, a quick reminder that if you enjoy the videos on my channel, please consider subscribing to this channel. And also please don't forget to press the like button in order to poke the YouTube algorithm. If you are using Ultimate Vocal Remover, I would really like to hear from you in the comment section below, or you can also join our Discord community. That link is in the description below. And with that being said, let's return to our conversation about Ultimate Vocal Remover.
So your story got to the point that you've launched this product. It's followed on from the Japanese developer to take it into a GUI. Originally, and I guess carry on with the journey up to the point that we're at now, because I guess quite a lot has changed. Even in the time that I've known it for the last 2 years or so, it's changed a lot.
It catapulted into something completely different from its original from my original goal. It just kind of took on a life of its own. Sure. From that point, whenever I posted on GitHub, and I posted the models that I had trained on GitHub as well, it started getting more traction. And people finally had because Turismo's vocal remover was already gaining popularity in and of itself, but then people saw there was a GUI version of it that I posted with slightly better models, so people started using that, and that's where it caught the attention of Offrey. Well, I call him Offrey. I mean, he's by screen name AUFR33. He's the other developer, core developer I credit, and he found me on GitHub, and he posted on one of the issues and said, "Hey, there's some imperfections here that I think I can help you with." And I gave him my email, and then that took UVR in a new direction too. So he and I started talking data and like how the models could be better, and we kind of got together and made it even better. So
he's a coder as well.
He's also a programmer.
Into training and AI models and stuff. Yeah, right.
Yeah, he runs X minus.
Okay, yeah, sure, right.
Yeah, and so we got together. We put our heads together, and we're trying to figure out ways to make things better. And he had a multiband approach, so he edited the original VR code to add multiband training to it, which is basically a way for to kind of put
just to explain to people that aren't aware, VR is one of the architectures that is used in
VR architecture.
VR architecture, and there's others like DMux and MDX and Is that
that's
fair?
correct.
Fair summation. Yeah. Okay.
That's correct. Yeah.
Great stuff.
It's one of the process methods, is what I call it.
Yeah.
One of the AIs. So I mean, really, UVR has 3 separate AI networks. No, or at least 4 actually, technically. First being VR, MDXNet, DMUX, and then MDXNet 23C, which is actually the newest version of MDXNet. It is technically a different network, but it shares some components with the original MDXNet. So it was. I've had to code them all in. But at this part of my story, where I'm at, is that it only had VR in it, and Offrey, the other developer I started working with, he kind of introduced a multi-band approach, which is, I guess, to find a way to kind of explain this on a more simplistic level. Basically, VR uses audio spectrograms, like it analyzes audio spectrograms. It converts them to the FFT spectrogram, and it uses, which I'm sure most of the audience probably knows, that spectrograms are basically just heat maps of audio.
Where you
can actually see the frequency. So the AI basically looks at those and determines like what the vocals look like and what it doesn't. Now VR specifically only uses magnitude spectrograms, not phase, because there's magnitude being which is what represents the intensity of each frequency, so you can see it more, and then phase representing the timing of where that data is. Phase is a whole hell of a lot harder to predict on a spectrogram than magnitude is, and VR only focuses on magnitude only. It actually uses the original phase from the mixture. Like, it saves the original phase from the mixture when it does a process, and it just does the magnitude. So that's part of the reason why VR tech tends to have more artifacts in it. And you get that, and you'll hear at certain points, some people think it sounds cleaner or clearer, but what the drawback is that you end up getting an instrumental that sounds a little bit more smeared. Like, there's a smeared sound, like it sounds a little bit more synthetic, because the phase from the mixture is still in there. And so you can hear it, and you could hear the vocal sound a little bit static, but that's the phase. That didn't get processed. So even though it technically sounds better, I guess some songs do, I can say that some songs
important to say that there's no one hit solution which always works the best.
Right.
A lot of the fun of it on the rabbit hole that you go down is there's 1,000,001 ways that you could demix something. And even though something like we'll probably get onto SDR and stuff like that, and how people try and get to the top of an SDR kind of ranking. But it's not always the best way to approach demixing a song, because the song itself can determine what might work better than others. Right.
So I guess after Offrey had, I call him Offrey, he which is the other developer I started to work with, whenever he started, he took on a multi-band approach, which basically just before you just got the one spectrogram, basically what he coded in is that it learned based on different resolutions. So I was trying to explain resolutions. Okay, so that's a whole other. There's so many parts of it. I guess to kind of make it to kind of make it easier to explain. Basically, he made it so that multi-band. Let's say when you see a model that says 3-band, it means that, like, he has the bottom band of like maybe between 0 to, let's say, 700 hertz. Has one resolution, maybe a finer resolution, because those are usually the harder frequencies to get to, and then like frequency between 700 and, let's say, 3000, or might have a different resolution, and then everything above that's going to have a different resolution. So that's basically what he means by multi-band. Is like each band, each certain a 3-band will have just different resolutions.
And you'll find typically a vocal will be in a certain band, and a bass will obviously be in a lower band, and so you can optimize it based on what you're trying to separate, basically, I guess.
Exactly. So with that was that made the VR models a lot better. Able to do a lot better training on that. And so that really picked up steam, and that made UVR even more popular. So at this point, this is when he started to kind of he and I started to work on different methods that we could use, different processes like ensembling. That was one thing. That was one. I wanted to
explain what that is. I mean, I know what it is, but it's not an obvious kind of.
So it's basically
even if you're using the online services, you would be aware that they might be being ensembled. Yeah.
Yeah, true. The way the ensemble works is it basically just it's a way for you to use multiple models. Like if there's 3 or 4 models, you can use all of them to do the separation to get a potentially better result. There are 3 ways to ensemble. There's averaging, which basically just takes all the results from, let's say, the vocal and instrumental stem and just averages them. So you're getting an average of all 3. Let's say we have an ensemble of 3 models. So you're gonna get an average of the 3 outputs that come from those 3 models. If you use max spec, that means that you're going to get the maximum result basically from for each stem.
For each stem, yeah.
Like basically, so where for example, like if in the vocal stem, you'll notice that like if you use max spec, you'll get the heaviest weighted vocal from each model. And the same thing goes for instrumental too.
Yeah.
And you might even get cleaner instrumentals out of it, but you might get more artifacts. That's the trade-off. There's always a trade-off between which one you use. So that was a big breakthrough. I mean, the min spec and max spec were actually a big breakthrough in ensembling. And Offrey was the one that kind of like, cause I had the idea and then he kind of was able to help bring it to life. It was actually a very simple, it was like a very simple find too. It's like, oh, all we need to do is, I won't get into the code, but like coding wise, it ended up being a lot simpler than we thought. And really effective too. And this is around the point, I want to say, around from mid 2021 all the way up until 2022. I was exclusively working on it. Now around this time, I had the GUI was still a bit more basic. It wasn't. I hadn't had an installer for it yet. So when I came out with the next release in early 2022, I was getting a lot of complaints in GitHub. Like, I don't know how to install this thing. I'm having trouble, and because you had to go through the manual install. Frustrates us. Like, and like I didn't have the bandwidth to help everybody. At that point. So I was like, okay, well, you know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to, I'm going to make an installer for it. And I'm going to try to package the whole thing together. And that's when I started to take it more seriously. And I was like, okay, nearly all of my free time was dedicated to UVR. Like I was just glued to, I was spending like maybe 10 plus hours a day for, I want to say almost a year straight on UVR. Like I put a lot of work and effort into it during this time. I figured out how to package it, and then I wanted to recode everything, and I wanted to clean everything up because I wanted the code to be easier to maintain. So I put the package together, the installer together, and I got help from for design. Boss Cortez, that's his screen name. He designed the new logo. He designed the new UVR logo, and he also gave me some tips. I'm like, maybe you should use these colors. I think this would make it look better. And I was just like, I'm really glad I took his advice, because I'm not a designer. So his input was great. Like,
for those that don't, that aren't part of there's a Discord community where UVR is a forum on there basically, and all of these names, if you've really got into the sort of people that are behind how this all progresses and moves forward, all these names, these sort of handles are in this Discord community basically. Is that fair? That's kind of how I understand it anyway. So my handle being Anjok. And your handle is Anjok. So just in case, just because there's no real names behind any of this, it's kind of, I mean, there is, but it's kind of like it's a modern kind of development kind of community.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it's a modern development community.
Yeah, like for the most part, I mean, prior to this, nobody really knew my face. So, I mean, now they do. Yeah. But at that point of development, when I say Boss Cortez, he's the one that developed. Like I said, he's the one that developed the logo. He developed the banner, and he kind of gave me some insights on like how the GUI should flow.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
Like
then
the usability kind of side of it. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Like that's very valuable feedback. And I guess that kind of dovetails into another point that I was going to make in terms of user feedback.
Yeah.
User feedback was also like the early users were instrumental in making UVR what it is today too, because a lot of their feedback and a lot of their suggestions and a lot of what their thoughts were really helped inform where I was going to take what it became, right?
Yeah.
And because I took all of that and I used it to make UVR better, and it got a lot better. So I mean, all the work that I put into it there in the early days was I'm gonna say early 2022 anyway, was based on that, and going forward it was based on that. Once I released the GUI version in mid 2022, I want to say it was in May. I released the first installer for it, like where now this is more accessible to people who didn't quite know Python. And that was another goal I had too, because I didn't want people to have to, I wanted it to be more accessible to people who aren't very programming inclined. Because not everybody's going to want to sit in front of the computer, try to figure out how to install Python and do all these other things. So a big goal, one of my biggest goals was to make this accessible at that point. And a lot of people loved the product, and a lot of people loved UVR and loved the models, but they didn't like the fact that they couldn't quite understand how to install it at the time. So having the installer, I think, really catapulted it. I guess maybe this is the perfectionist in me. I wanted to work for everybody. It's seamlessly.
Well, if you're spending 10 hours a day on this for a year or two, then you are a perfectionist. There's no doubt about that.
You want it to work for, and it's not necessarily because it's not really me. It's just because, I mean, it's more that I want people to get a good experience out of it. I want people to get I want them to be able to use it properly, and that's why I extended to Mac to making it usable on Mac. In fact, I spent a considerable amount of time devoted to the Mac users, so that it would be compatible, in being able to use the new M1, M2, M3 chips as GPUs, which I'll say is that was one of my biggest breakthroughs. See, I think a lot of what's coming out now, I'm excited about it. Personally, I want to keep UVR free always, forever. Like I don't ever plan on monetizing it, like making it commercial. Basically, it's always going to be open source. That was the I want this to be accessible to everybody, and I also want to encourage other companies to make this process better. I'm glad that services like Lalo and Moises exist, because it's like I'm excited to see what type of breakthroughs that they'll come out with.
This is everything for today. If you want to listen to the entire conversation we had with Anthony, I strongly encourage you to check out our podcast channel. Link is in the description below. If you have any questions or comments, please use the comment section or join our Discord community. Once again, link in the description below. And with that being said, see you at the next video.